This podcast and content posted by Dr. Judith Joseph is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast or website is at the user's own risk. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional diagnoses or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical or mental health condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Hello, I'm so grateful that you chose to listen to this podcast. I'm Dr. Judith, a board-certified psychiatrist and researcher. And on this podcast, you will hear from world-renowned experts. At the end of every single podcast of The Vault, every expert talks about a time in their lives when they were struggling and no one knew it. And they talk about what they used to get through that struggle. So make sure you listen through till the end and you subscribe and share with a friend. Dr. Ian Smith is a famous television doctor who is Harvard and Columbia trained and has worked for President Obama. Dr. Ian Smith is one of the first television doctors that I grew up watching, and he has written several #1 New York Times bestselling books about health and nutrition. You may recognize him from television shows such as Celebrity Fit Club, Oprah, and other national networks because he was a former medical correspondent for NBC News Network. Dr. Ian's new book, Eat Your Age, talks about how your diet needs to change over time to meet your body's demands. You can't eat what you were eating in your 20s in your 50s, and you should be adjusting things based on your hormones and your metabolism. Here's what Dr. Ian had to say about nutrition.
And B12 is important, by the way, because as we age, our ability to absorb B12 decreases. That's one of my 60s power nutrients, by the way. A lot of people are B12 deficient and don't know it.
Yeah, it's so true. So true. I recently had a client who was having this tingling sensation, this weakness, and they had done x-rays, they had done MRIs, they did everything. And it took them like 6 months to realize, wait a second, this person's B12 deficient. And it was like, wow, a vitamin deficiency can cause all of that, right?
B12, red blood cell formation, nerve issues. That's right, and cellular metabolism. So there you go. So yes, so this is why this is so important to me, because in the book, I try to explain to people, this is what these nutrients do in your body. And so I'm hoping that people can become better detectives of their own health. I don't expect them to diagnose it like you and I would diagnose it, but at least they can have some ideas of what may be causing some of these problems. And sometimes, to be honest with you, doctors miss it too, by the way.
They do.
Right?
They do.
And they're off down another rabbit hole doing all these tests that are invasive and inconvenient and expensive, not because they want to, but because they're searching and searching.
You won't want to miss this episode of The Vault. Dr. Ian, thank you so much for being in The Vault today.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be with you.
You have this new book coming out, and it's about nutrition and really building your body and your mind in a way that you have agency, right? And, you know, it's cliche to say that food is medicine, but it really is. In my practice with my patients, I not only talk about therapy and medications, I talk about like the foods that you eat to support your mental health and your well-being. So tell us about how you discovered this path for yourself and how it's changed the way that you approach medicine.
Sure. So Eat Your Age is an idea that I've had for a while now. My old editor and I disagreed. She didn't think there was enough content to make it a full book. I disagreed with her. But when I switched houses and pitched it to my new editor, she loved the idea. And the reason why I wanted to do idea was because so many people would say to me, what is it? What's going on with me where I'm in my 40s or 50s or 60s and I can't eat the way I did in my 20s or 30s? I'm not moving the same way. Is there something wrong with me? Should I be doing something different? And what I realized is that people don't understand that for every decade of your life, your body just doesn't change physically, but it changes physiologically. And what you were able to eat and how you moved in your 20s and 30s is not the same thing that's necessarily appropriate in your 50s or 60s plus. And so this book says that for every decade, starting in your 30s, I'm going to give you your top 10 power nutrients. I'm going to give you your safe and best exercises. I'm going to give you the medical conditions that are lurking around the corner and what screening tests you need to be mindful of. And then at the end of each decade, I give you a 30-day customized meal plan to incorporate all of your power nutrients for your particular decade so that you are able to basically better arm your body to either prevent disease or manage disease if you have it. So if you're suffering from type 2 diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, high cholesterol, hypertension, high blood pressure, if you're suffering from those things, it is my belief that in some cases, medical intervention is necessary, medications, but in a lot of cases, making lifestyle behavioral changes can go a long way. And so with Eat Your Age, I want to show people what they can do with food to try to make their life, the quality of life much better.
Yeah, it's like, it's almost as if like our science has gone backwards, right? Like this is stuff that our ancestors knew. They knew that depending on what they ate that day, they felt a certain way. And it really meant the difference between survival and not surviving. Yet we've come up in this like very modern age where things are processed and food was mass produced to end starvation. But people aren't starving the way they did before. So why are we eating this processed food? It just makes sense. So can you tell us about the different decades, right? Because there are different ages of people listening to this. So what are the differences between the decades in terms of how you eat and how it makes you feel?
Yeah, before I do that, let me just say you're absolutely correct. And that when you look at a country as powerful and as wealthy as ours and as advanced as ours, the fact that we have so much consumption of processed foods really ties back into manufacturing. The idea is that manufacturers have really hijacked the food health of the country for business purposes. Obviously producing processed foods is more economical, greater margins. You produce foods with all these synthetic and processed ingredients that give it a longer shelf life so it won't spoil on the grocery store shelves. So all these reasons for producing this food that are not about our health, which is what food should be. Food should be, it's our fuel, and the agenda of a lot of manufacturers, food manufacturers, is the bottom line, the profit. And so it's really sad that in our country that happens. And the other part of it is that people who are either uneducated, who are either health illiterate, or who don't have access to healthy foods, they get the worst share of all this because, they live in food deserts where they can't get healthy foods. And when they do get healthy foods, they're too expensive. So it really is a very vicious cycle. And I'm hoping that as people become more educated about health and more pressures are applied to manufacturers, that there is more equality in how people can access healthier food. So each decade, I start in the 30s. And I kind of have a concept for each decade. For example, 30s is the decade of foundation. You are building the foundation for the future. So what you do in your 30s can manifest in your 50s, 60s plus. So the idea is really to get your body and your mind in a great place so you can withstand what will be stressors coming down the road. So, for example, calcium is a big deal for me in the 30s, particularly when you talk to women, dealing with bone density and making sure that you're consuming enough calcium so that when you get into your 50s and 60s plus, you're not suffering from osteopenia or osteoporosis. So the book goes in, and by the way, the book takes each nutrient, there are 10 in each decade, and it explains what the nutrient does in the body. Then it tells you where you can get it from. So calcium, for example, you can get it from obviously dairy products like hard cheese is really good because hard cheese has a greater concentration of calcium because it's less water in there. But also like broccoli. Who knew broccoli was a great source of calcium? Also in your 30s, iron is important. We talk about iron deficiency anemia. A lot of people in their 30s begin their iron deficiency. They're not eating enough iron. Iron, of course, is the building block of hemoglobin, which is the protein in the red blood cells that's carrying the oxygen, which we need to breathe and to nourish the rest of the body. And so I show you that, hey, listen, spinach is a great source of iron. Eggs are a great source of iron. So in your 30s, there's a whole list of things like that you go through. 40s is a decade of energy demands and hormonal change. And so... I'm
glad you brought up hormones because in your 30s, especially for Black women, we don't think about, or we don't know that we go through perimenopause and menopause sooner. So, between the correlation between bone density loss and hormonal shifts is really well known, right? The other thing is that, bleeding changes as you go through perimenopause and menopause. So you go through these very erratic kind of spikes of your hormones. So you do need to have more iron. And so people are like, I don't know why I feel so tired. But it's like, you need some iron in your diet, right? But people don't know this. So like having that correlation of, okay, especially if you're, a Black woman, you need to be thinking about this sooner. And women in general, like, perimenopause starts in your late 30s, early 40s. But we tend to have this idea that menopause starts when you're 50 and you lost your period, but it goes on. That perimenopause period goes on for a long time. So we need to be like doing things for our bodies during that time. And that window of opportunity is so rich. Like in your 30s, if you start building up your bone mass, right? And you know this, and you start building up your blood and you start doing things to support your muscles, you're better off in your 50s. So like by the time it's never too late, but by the time you're approaching 50s, that's the opportunity that you lost. So I think it's great that you break it down by decades because it's actionable. It allows people to feel as if, there's still time for them, so to speak. And really, I think it helps doctors to prepare patients because instead of being reactive, we're proactive. But please go ahead and tell us about our 40s now.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. And I'm glad you added that to the conversation. That is absolutely spot on. 40s is about increasing your energy. There's a lot happening in your 40s. People are really immersed in their careers. They may have bustling families. There's all kinds of stuff that's happening and you need energy. So antioxidants are a big deal. Antioxidants are these really powerful things that fight free radicals, which are molecules that want to damage your cells. And so the antioxidants fight against them. Antioxidants also increase your energy levels. So it's important to eat things like blueberries and strawberries and raspberries. Artichokes, who knew? Artichokes have lots of antioxidants in them. And then also I talk about, in your 40s, you got to start thinking about your blood vessels and your heart. Mm-hmm. Like you said, people think, heart disease in my 50s or 60s. No. Mm-hmm. Heart disease is a cumulative effect, right? It's an aggregate. It starts slowly and it just builds and builds and builds. So in your 40s, you need to be mindful. So I talk about MUFAs, monounsaturated fatty acids are really important. They raise the good cholesterol, which is the HDL. They lower the bad cholesterol, which is the LDL. And you can get them in several sources. For example, extra virgin olive oil, which is a staple in the Mediterranean diet, and which is why they are a lot of blue zones, those are the areas in the world that live longer and live happier. They use a lot of olive oil in their food preparation. Also, avocado. Avocados are hugely dense and monounsaturated fats. So anyway, so those are some examples of what would be good in your 40s. And then you talk about your 50s, which is a very interesting decade. When I was growing up, 50s was like, people thought it was towards the end of the road. You know what I mean? Like, that's it. You reach 50, like, you don't have much left. And thankfully, I think that perspective has changed. I look at 50s and 60s plus, the perspective that it's about loss is, in my opinion, the wrong way to look at it. I look at it as a chance, it's opportunity. As people get older, they got to see the opportunities in life, not the loss of opportunities, but the gaining of opportunities. And so when I think about 50s, I think about gastrointestinal health. As you know, as we get older, our GI tract, our gastrointestinal tract starts to slow down. And that's just part of the aging process. And so our ability to process foods and digest foods like we did in our 20s and 30s changes. So we got to change how we eat. For example, eating a lot of red meat as you get older is not a good idea. I mean, red meat is already tough to digest in the beginning, but then to try to digest it when your GI tract is slowing down is not great. So fiber is a big deal in your 50s and going forward to keep you regular, to keep things moving nicely. Fiber is also, by the way, great for people who suffer from type 2 diabetes and cholesterol. It can also help lower those things. So fiber is one thing. Also, your immune system. Your immune system gets tired sometimes, and sometimes it needs a little pickup. And so I think about vitamin C, which is a very powerful antioxidant. So it helps to boost your immune system. You can get them in all kinds of things like peppers, tomatoes have lots of vitamin C. Tomatoes also have lycopene, which is a great antioxidant for prostate cancer prevention. Anyway, so that's kind of the idea of your 50s. And then your 60s plus. Your 60s plus, in my opinion, is about looking at physical health, strength, cognitive abilities, preventing cognitive decline, and your heart and brain health. So I think about salmon and walnuts, which are huge in omega-3 fatty acids. Wonderful, wonderful. Fatty fish have lots of omega-3s. Omega-3s are heart healthy, brain healthy. Walnuts have them. Tuna fish, mackerel, halibut, rainbow trout. So that's an idea for you in your 60s plus.
How come people get those things without eating fish? Because I hear a lot in my older clients of like, I don't like the way fish tastes. It's like, look, so what could they do if they're not into walnuts? Because walnuts, they're great, but they're so dry, And if you're not into fish, it's like really difficult. So what are some alternative things that people can eat to get this?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. So in chapter 3 of Eat Your Age, I did this exactly for that reason, okay? And so it lists all the different sources or some of the different sources for these things. So if you go to page 56, omega-3s, you can find them in fortified foods like yogurt and eggs, soy beverages. You can find them in nuts and seeds like chia, flax seeds, hemp seeds. Oils have them, flaxseed oil, soybean oil, canola oil. So there are a lot of other sources, yes, beyond walnuts and beyond fish, and also supplements. Yes, I would prefer that you got most of your nutrition through foods because those nutrients tend to be more concentrated in a bioavailable way, which means that your body can absorb them in most cases, not all cases. So I prefer them through food, but there are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, are not getting it through food. A supplement does not hurt. So that's extremely important. My biggest takeaway in the book and in general is people in their 50s and 60s plus have got to lift weights. Okay, I'm going to say this very carefully. Cardio training is great. It's great for your heart. It's great for your lungs. Awesome. But you need resistance training to build muscles.
Yeah. As
we get older, our muscles atrophy. They shrink. Our strength declines. That is very, very functionally debilitating. Why? 3 major reasons. 1, muscles increase your metabolism, which means you can lose weight and consume calories and burn those calories off. Number 2, muscles are very protective for your joints. Okay? People who have muscle weakness tend to have more joint pain and more joint issues. And 3, muscles are important for stability. So as you get older and you start losing proprioception, which is your ability to relate to spaces without paying attention, older people who have muscle weakness, limb weakness, they don't lift their legs up as high. They clip the curb and then they fall. They have a fracture, and now you start that cascade. Yeah. So older people have to lift weights. I can't say this enough. Real weights, not 2 pounds and 3 pounds. They have to challenge the muscle to grow the muscle. And in order to do that, they have to consume the right amount of protein. The vast majority of people above the age of 45 are consuming maybe half of the amount of protein that they need on a daily basis. So what is the right number?
Right. So how does that look? Because, whenever they recommend the protein and all that stuff, I'm always like, it helps to visualize it because you'll say so-and-so grams. And I'm like, well, is that like a chicken leg or a chicken breast? So if you were to go by what the actual food is, what's the appropriate amount of protein?
Yeah. So here's the algorithm I like to use, and I think that this is very user-friendly. So people should consume between 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of desired weight. What does that mean? If you want to weigh 125 pounds, that's your desired weight, you should consume about 125 grams of protein per day. Okay.
What does that look like? What does 125 grams look like?
So, for example, if you were to consume, let's say, a serving of black beans, you may end up consuming about, and depending on what you put in it, but you can consume anywhere from 15 to 25 grams of protein in one serving. Okay?
That's it? I need to eat more beans.
Well, well, you need to eat beans for a lot of reasons, by the way.
Yeah.
Lots of fiber in beans, too, by the way. Great fiber. But then you look at, for example, you look at chicken or salmon, right? So I get most of I have a recipe book here. I get most of my protein through things like chicken and salmon. So I'm trying to build muscle, right? For the last 8 months, I've been trying to build muscle. And so I've been very diet and workout focused to build muscle. And by the way, it's been spectacular. I feel good. I'm stronger than I was when I was 25. And my energy is great. But I do mine mostly through chicken. And I do it through chicken and through fish. I love salmon for the reasons I explained to you. But I also eat a lot of beans. Lentils are fantastic. Chickpeas, garbanzo beans are fantastic. But
what about eggs? Are eggs okay?
Yes.
Are eggs safe? Okay.
Yeah, eggs are definitely safe. I'm just not an egg guy, just a personal preference. But eggs are wonderful because they have lots of protein. And they have, a lot of other nutrients in them. I've never been, do you like eggs? I've never been an egg guy.
I do. I like eggs, but I've been cautious because high cholesterol runs in my family. And I'm like, that was the only thing on my annual. It was a borderline cholesterol. So I'm like, oh, I love egg and cheese, So. Yeah.
I feel like egg whites are a really great source, right? So the answer to you is egg whites because it's full of protein and it doesn't have the calories, But if you took a 6-ounce serving, which is typical what you find in the store, of chicken, it's 43 grams of protein.
Wow, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And steak can be as much as 60 grams.
Wow.
So you can piece together enough protein. You just got to be conscious of where you're getting it from, whether it's beans or meat or fish, even nuts. Almonds are a great source of protein, and so I think that people just have to be conscious of how they piece together their protein. But people are not eating enough protein. I can't say that enough. And you got to do it. You need it for your strength.
Do you think people aren't eating enough protein because of all the processed foods that are just easier to have access to? Because with protein, you have to cook it, right? No one wants to eat protein bars all day long, right? But if you're getting the bulk of your protein through let's say beans or eggs or meats, fish, you gotta cook it unless you're eating sushi all day, right?
I was just gonna say, so spicy tuna is my favorite sushi. I eat a lot of it, but in most cases, to get the protein, you are typically cooking it unless it's a raw product. And I think that a lot of processed foods don't have a tremendous amount of protein in it. Instead, it has a lot of salt and a lot of sugar and a lot of other additives. And I think that is one of the downfalls. I also think that people just aren't aware. People don't realize that, what foods have protein in them and how much of those foods they need to meet what their daily objective should be. So I think it's a knowledge issue for a lot of people.
You're right. Because when I tell my clients about, certain foods are important to beat anxiety and depression, they look at me like, what? And I'm like, yeah, it really is. So can you tell us about some of those foods that if you, let's say took some of the processed food out of your diet and you added more of these foods to your diet, it actually supports your mental health, your memory, your ability to sleep, your anxiety, your depression. Yeah,
it's interesting. I was just writing about, I'm working on a new book, and I'm trying to write a book that I'm calling, me and my big-minded ideas, but I'm calling it a seminal book on Black health, because I don't feel as though there is one, and I don't know why there isn't one, and I feel like there needs to be one, because we have such disparities in our health, and there's a reason why our population is stagnating, because of our mortality rate. Our lifespan is not as long as others. And so I'm really getting into this idea of, is it possible to educate large numbers of people for them to get a basic understanding. They won't understand like you and I do, obviously, we're physicians, but can we educate people at a basic level so they have at least a foundation of understanding so they can make better decisions that lead to better health outcomes?
Yeah.
Instead of always trying to treat the illness, spending more time trying to prevent it, catching it early, and then if it does happen, how do we manage it better? Other than jumping to medications. A friend of mine, her mother, for example, this is a great example. So her mother was diagnosed with AFib, atrial fibrillation, the abnormal rhythm of the heart. And the doctors put her on a medication to help control her rhythm. I mean, which is, AFib can kill you. So you have to control your rhythm. She, however, she's an older Black woman. She felt, and the doctor suggested that she have ablation on her heart, and a minimally invasive procedure for those who don't understand, it's a minimally invasive procedure to cut the circuit, the electrical circuit that is not working correctly, to stop it from happening so that the heart can beat normally. She thought the doctor was saying that because the doctor wanted to do extra.
Make some money.
Do extra intervention, right? And so when I talked to her, I explained to her what her condition was in terms that she could understand. This is what is wrong with your heart. Yeah. These are the two categories of options you have to treat your heart. You can treat it through either physically stopping that bad circuit and short circuit it so it doesn't keep recharging, or you can take medications that will help. Those are your two options. Without either option, you are potentially set up to have a very fatal event. Once I explained it to her, she totally got it, right? But she just wasn't armed with the information. And just hearing it from her doctor, she didn't really hear her doctor. You understand what I'm saying? And so she had a whole mindset that this is horrific. They're just trying to put me on medication or trying to do surgery on me. Yeah. But these are life-saving things. And the unfortunate part is for us as African Americans, a lot of times because our health literacy is so low, we either don't understand the information and therefore can't act on it, or we don't get the information, or when we get the information, we misunderstand and misinterpret the information. Yeah. It doesn't matter. All these things lead to bad outcomes, which leads to our life expectancy being shorter. Right.
Yeah, and also with the way the healthcare system is, you don't get the information in a way that is, I think, relatable, right? If somebody says, oh, you could take a medicine or we can operate on your heart, like someone's going to hear that and be like, well, I'd just rather take the medicine. But if they know that if they miss a dose, that could be life or death, right? So like, you're absolutely right about that.
And by the way, and the medication she was on, one of the side effects was back pain. So she wanted to get off the medication because it was hurting her back. Well, it's the medication or it's the ablation. It's one or the other. Otherwise, the third option is not good. We won't be talking in a year. You know what I mean? I wanted to give you the answer. I just finished writing all this stuff down about things that will fight depression and anxiety. Yeah. I wanted to give that to you, okay?
Please.
I'm doing a segment on the Today Show, and this is one of my categories, actually.
Okay, awesome.
So zinc is very important. They have been linked to lowering anxiety. Oysters, cashews, liver, beef, egg yolks. A great example where you can find zinc. Of course, there are others, but these are just some of the top of the line examples. Omega-3s. Studies suggest that they can improve both anxiety and depression in studies that have been completed. So once again, we talked about that. Fatty fish, walnuts, supplements, certain types of oils. High fiber grains like whole wheat pasta and bread, oatmeal, sweet potatoes. These are very good because they help your body release serotonin, which of course, is your feel-good hormone. So that can be very good for depression. Then you talk about vitamin B12 foods, things like clams, mussels, lean beef, eggs, and milk. This can be very important because it helps to regulate something called SAM, which I won't get into the technical name, but it's important for regulating our mood. And so, and B12 is important, by the way, because as we age, our ability to absorb B12 decreases. So a lot of people are actually, that's one of my 60s power nutrients, by the way. A lot of 60s plus, a lot of people are B12 deficient and don't know it.
Yeah, and, it's so true. So true. I recently had a client who was having this tingling sensation, this weakness, and they had done x-rays, they had done MRIs, they did everything. And it took them like 6 months to realize, wait a second, this person's B12 deficient. And it was like, wow, a vitamin deficiency can cause all of that, right?
B12, red blood cell formation, nerve issues.
The nerves, yes.
That's right, and cellular metabolism. So there you go. So yes, so this is why this is so important to me, because in the book, I try to explain to people, this is what these nutrients do in your body. Yeah. And so I'm hoping that people can become better detectives of their own health. I don't expect them to diagnose it like you and I would diagnose it, but at least they can have some ideas of what may be causing some of these problems. And sometimes, to be honest with you, doctors miss it too, by the way.
They do.
Right?
They do.
And they're off down another rabbit hole doing all these tests that are invasive and inconvenient and expensive, not because they want to, but because they're searching and searching. And there you go. It's a blood test, vitamin B12 deficiency. So but that's also important for mood also.
It's so important. And in my lab, the motto is that know the science of your happiness. And the reason that's the motto is that a lot of us use what other people use to make them happy, to make them healthy, but we're not understanding our unique science. So know the science of your happiness, because you're the only person who will ever exist. That's you, the only person, right? So you are so unique and special. Know how the science applies to you. I always ask my my experts to name a time in their lives when on the outside, things look so put together. They were like crushing it. People were like, oh my gosh, you're doing all these great things. You're a doctor, you're on TV, you're writing books, but you knew you were struggling inside. And how did you get through it?
So when I was younger and I was a correspondent for NBC News, I had a great life and I looked great. Like you said, outside everything looked great. My career was great. But things weren't exactly where I wanted them to be. And so while I had a great facade, I was struggling internally. And I was also much younger, so I also wasn't saving money like I should have. So I was spending money up and down Fifth Avenue, like money was coming from a faucet, because I was making at that time a considerable amount of money for a young guy. But I got myself into some financial trouble too, by the way. And then the income stopped. There was a pause of the money coming in, and I had all this debt and all these responsibilities. And honestly, I got through it with prayer. I mean, I really, I got on my knees. I'll never forget it. I got on my knees one afternoon and just prayed to God. And I said to him, if you will spare me and help me in this situation, I promise you with everything I have, I will never put myself in this situation again. I've learned my lesson. I know I did wrong, and just help me get out of this one situation. And my goodness, literally like a week later, I had this, I get emotional thinking about it. I had a check show up in my mailbox for a book that I had written and had never published, but somehow someone bought it in Germany. I don't know how they got the manuscript. I have no clue, but they bought this unpublished book that I'd written. They bought it in Germany to publish. And I got this envelope and a letter with a check that said, here's your money for this. It was...
Wow. How do you say thank God in German?
I don't know, but I couldn't learn. But I know how to do it in English, and I was thanking God for it. And to this day, that was just like a miracle to me. And it changed my life because I was young. So it wasn't like I wasn't going to make more money, but it changed my perspective of becoming more fiscally responsible and setting better priorities in my life of what is really important. Like I like material things like anybody else, right? I mean, but my fascination with brand labels and things like that, they just don't exist like they used to when I was younger. You know, like, yeah, I want to look good and feel good, but what makes me look good and feel good is not the label that you can't see.
Yes.
You know, it's how it looks on me. That's what. So who cares who makes it? So it just taught me a lot about priorities in life, and I got through it, and I'm very grateful still.
Thank you for sharing that story. In my book, I talk about how values are priceless, not things with price tags. And we often chase the things with the price tags. But at the end of the day, when we have 5-10 minutes left of this life, we're not going to be like, I wish I got that Gucci loafer. We're going to be like, I wish I had 10 minutes with my loved one. You know, I wish I saw that sunset again that really fed my soul, you know? So thank you so much for being on The Vault. Where can we find you and follow you, and where can we buy your book?
Yeah, so Eat Your Age is available everywhere. So you can get on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart. But I also have a great Facebook group where I help people for free get through the program. We got several thousand people in the group. So the group on Facebook is called Eat Your Age. So just look that up and join it. On Instagram, you and I follow each other. I do a lot of free exercises and demos. So my Instagram is @Dr. spell it out, Ian Smith, IAN Smith. And if people have questions, they can always email me, eatyourage@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for all that you do for the community and for healthcare. So we appreciate you.
You too, by the way. You're doing amazing stuff, and I have to be honest with you. You know, I'm older than all you guys who are now taking over, and I'm so happy. I met a couple of other young doctors who are doing their thing, and I'm so happy that your generation and beneath you, that you guys are taking the lead, because I was out here by myself for a long time in this game, and you guys are doing it, and I'm so excited because I feel like it's going to be better. You guys are going to be better than I am and have a greater reach than I did, and I love that you're doing this. Thank you. We need more of you. I mean, it's just awesome.
Well, thank you for paving the way. And by the way, you don't look older, so I'm about to get that book and start eating my age too. Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Make sure that you subscribe. When you subscribe, it helps me to continue to deliver this mental health information for free to millions of listeners. So please support my mission. Please pick up my book, High Functioning, and let's build a happier life together.